Thanks for tuning in to the Prime Bookseller Podcast, the bi-weekly podcast discussing all things Amazon bookselling.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Prime Bookselling Podcast. I'm Eric, and we're back with another episode, and we're finally jumping into the specific book topics now. So you're going to hear a lot more information specifically about books. But what we're going to talk about today is a pretty basic topic, and I apologize to everybody because a lot of you probably already know this topic because I'm assuming at least some of you have some experience with selling books. But again, this is a beginner's podcast, so we're taking her from the top. We're not leaving anything out so that people understand everything they need to know. And this topic that we're talking about is also somewhat controversial because some people believe this is a thing and other people believe this is not a thing. And that thing that we're talking about is the Prime book bump. And to be clear, that this does actually exist with almost every product category on Amazon, but it's just a more prevalent thing in books. And for some reason, I think mainly because of like textbook season and things like that, the Prime book bump can be a little quirky in books a lot of times, leaving a lot more opportunity than you might see in other spaces. So, what is the Prime book bump? When somebody refers to that, they're talking about basically the gap between a seller selling the book as an FBA seller and a seller selling the book as an MFN seller. So now, if you're not familiar with those two terms, we're basically I'll rehash those real quick. MFN means that the seller is shipping the book out of their own warehouse. FBA means it's shipping out of an Amazon warehouse. The biggest difference between those from an end customer perspective is that generally the merchant fulfilled seller does not get a Prime badge, whereas the FBA seller does. Now, if you look at a lot of books on Amazon, now this is, I should say, there is a lot of books, but the majority of books do not have this. So if you just start randomly looking up books, you'll see that, well, most of them don't have this kind of bump, but there are plenty of books out there that do. You just need to know how to find them. There are plenty of books that people can buy from a merchant fulfilled seller for, let's say, $4. But then if you look at the lowest Prime seller, they're charging like $24 for that same book. Same exact book, used copy, same condition, everything. But because the one book has a Prime tag on it, sometimes, now I'm not going to say that it's more often that the customer buys that book, but there are plenty of occasions where the customer will just come in, want the 2-day faster shipping, want the reliability if they know it's coming from an Amazon warehouse, want to take advantage of their Prime benefits. I mean, they're paying $140, I think, at this point in time for Prime. So they'll just buy that more expensive Prime book. And this is a huge opportunity for Amazon booksellers because, I mean, literally, we're going to talk later in this session, in this podcast, there's tools out there that are just leveraging the gap between these two books. And then bam, they're selling it for 3 times as much as they bought it for right on Amazon, and it works. And most people getting into this space would tell you that's not going to work. But unfortunately, it does. And there are naysayers that do believe that the Prime book bump is kind of once existed and doesn't exist anymore. And I can see why they would believe that, but I can also tell you that the way I personally source books on a week-to-week basis, it's based completely on that Prime book bump. And my system works. I make money. So I'm not going to tell you that if you find a book that you can buy merchant fulfilled on Amazon for $6 and the lowest FBA price is $54.99, I will tell you that you're probably not going to sell that book for $54.99. You might sell it for $54.99, but you probably won't. But you probably will sell it for more than the $6 that you bought it for from the merchant fulfilled seller. So this is as you can imagine, this is a huge opportunity for booksellers. And honestly, this is probably one of the biggest factors right now that drives the Amazon bookselling business, because the truth of the matter is on the merchant fulfilled side of things, the sellers that are there, that are in that space, are so big and so they're processing through so many books at all times. That is a really, really tough and competitive market, because I mean, there's literally companies out there that are bringing in gaylords of books by the semi-truck full, processing them through and selling them. And on a small scale, a seller can't really compete with that kind of throughput. It's just they're happy to make 10 cents on a book, and they'll just keep pumping them through and pumping through thousands an hour, and they end up making a profit. Well, us as small independent sellers, we can't compete with that. But the biggest thing is that they don't have the tools, and they choose not to use this FBA system. And so this FBA system opens it up for the little bookseller to make a lot of money. So this is a concept that you're going to see a lot. You're going to need to understand as we go through sourcing, because if you don't understand sourcing, on this podcast, I might tell you to look at a book and say, blah, 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 look at this. And then you'll be like, nobody's ever going to buy that. I can buy it from this guy for $4. Well, the reason why going into this, I know it's unbelievable, but you have to accept the fact that this does work, that people are willing to pay more money for a Prime item than a merchant fulfilled item. And it seems like it's excessively it happens more frequently in books, because books are so niche and sales come across so often. I don't know. And textbook season plays a big variable. There's so many reasons why this works, but I think in our default mind, we would think there's no way this works. And you won't know that it works until you test it, but you're just going to have to trust me from this podcast that this does work. It does exist. You're not going to see, if you're buying books at a 250, like you look it up and like every book I buy, I'm making a 250% margin on it. Well, I'm here to tell you that the majority of those books are not going to end up selling for that inflated price that you see, but it's going to come down and it's going to meet in the middle somewhere, and you're still going to make a good profit off of it by following that strategy. So that's basically all I wanted to talk about with the Prime Book Bump. Again, if there's any questions about this, if you feel like I left anything out, please, you can email me at sales@kingsridgemedia.com. As well, as usual, we do have a number of services available for booksellers that you can take a look at. If you look down in the show notes of this podcast, there should be links to each of them. You can read them. There's a lot of sourcing solutions as well as some support solutions if you have questions and concerns about starting an Amazon business. And we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode. And moving forward, it should be way more book specific at this point in time. So if you've been kind of like, I don't feel like I'm learning anything about the book business specifically, that's probably going to pick up starting after this episode, because we're going to actually delve right into some of the book sourcing strategies that are common and what I think of them, and other strategies that are out there that I think are less used, but are something that people are worth looking into. So with that, I'll wrap this episode up, and thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to the Prime Bookseller Podcast. Join us for the next episode as we discuss all things Amazon bookselling.